NBC already firing Ronna McDaniel. A paid contributor after less than a week. The report comes after the Republican National Committee chairwoman was signed in as an analyst last Friday. What followed was a revolt by current and former staffers and unprecedented on-air rebukes of network leadership by NBC and MSNBC hosts, including stars Rachel Maddow, Joy Reid, and Nicole Wallace. Huh. I didn't even know they took her.
And I will also say, if you care what I think about this, I will tell you the fact that Ms. McDaniel is on the payroll at NBC News, to me, that is an...
Yeah, this was the former head of the RNC committee. Well, not RNC committee, just RNC. Yeah, I didn't even realize this, that NBC just hired her. Like, oh yeah, Captain Hitler over there. Let's just get Captain Hitler over here. You know? She had ties to January 6th, if I recall correctly. Yeah, no, she's a monster, yeah. She's just slightly less insane than the people that she's being replaced by, you know? Yeah, fair and balanced. It's the liberal attitude. Got to have a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Majority Report went over it a bit. NBC has hired 10 Republicans for on-air talent. Of course, got to show off how bipartisan you are, Got to have some of people who are right and some of people who are wrong. Maddow said she'd been told that MSNBC management had signed off on the hiring, but when the staff expressed outrage, it was made clear that McDaniel would not appear on the cable network, which appeals primarily to liberal viewers. Since then, there's been an effort in other parts of the company to muddy that up in the press and make that seem like that's not going to happen. Somebody on Twitter said this would be the equivalent of NBC hiring Goebbels after a falling out with Hitler or something. I mean, might as well. Yeah, it's insane. Wallace said that with the hiring, NBC has said to election deniers, not just that they can do that on our airwaves, but that they can do that as one of us, a badge-carrying employee of NBC News, as a paid contributor to our sacred airwaves. That's a liberal rebuke right there, but all right. Yeah. The liberal effort to rehabilitate everyone they can. They did this with George Bush, too.
Explicable. I mean, you wouldn't hire a wise guy. You wouldn't hire a made man, like a mobster.
Yeah, true. This is real DEI. You got to include the Nazi representation. Yeah, true. This is folks, we got to be anti-DEI. This is DEI in action right here, Got to get all sides.
Work at a DA's office, right? You wouldn't hire a pickpocket to work as a TSA screener. And so I find the decision to put her on the payroll inexplicable. And I hope they will reverse their decision.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation, because I don't know what to believe. She is now a paid contributor by NBC News. And look, there's a reason why there's a lot of journalists at NBC News uncomfortable with this, because many of our professional dealings with the RNC over the last 6 years have been met with gaslighting, have been met with character assassination. You got put into an impossible situation, booking this.
I don't even like this, because it's framing it as though the issue is like, oh, we've disagreed so much with the RNC. No, it's just that they're wrong and a fascist. That's it. If you believe that NBC and MSNBC exist as news organizations and they have some obligation to deliver the truth, you can't reconcile that with, oh, it would be good content for us to have this lunatic on board. There's no, it's not a matter of like professional acceptability, rudeness, character assassination, gaslighting, or anything else. It's just the matter of like, it permanently denigrates any possible legitimacy your organization has, because you're essentially indicating that your hiring practices are not dictated by adherence to the truth, quality of one's perspective, or anything like that. Rather just like what makes us the money. And we know that's the case, but usually they're not that transparent about it,
This interview, and then all of a sudden the rugs pull out from under you. You find out she's being paid to show up. It's unfortunate for this program.
She was not hired by MSNBC. I found out about it on Friday when it was publicly announced. I stopped inviting Trump liars like her on this program in 2016 because I've never seen a satisfying, successful interview of a Trump liar and have never thought that I alone could crack the code of how to interview a Trump liar.
That's a good point. Yeah. The MAGA crowd aren't like neocons who you can like debate the merits of their position. When has anyone ever successfully debated the merits of any position with any like MAGA person, with you know, any of the elected officials, any of the RNC chairs, like any of their pundits even? It doesn't happen. They don't talk about or debate anything. They just say things that are false. And the entire interview is essentially either you letting them slide on wrong things they're saying, or you just correct them and they never accept it. Like there's nothing to talk about with them. They're anti-empiricist. Isn't that why you don't debate now? For the most part, yes. There's no point. They don't have positions to argue. They're so openly anti-empiricist, so like fascist at first principle, not even fascism having arrived there from some other positions they'll defend. They just start from there, that there's very little to talk about with them. It's just a matter of how much time you're willing to dedicate to fact-checking them. That's it. Yeah, there's not like a value you can really challenge them on. Also, I just hate her face and don't think she'd be, you know, I just don't want to look at her, so keep her off TV, please. This isn't the first time NBC has done shit like this recently. Remember when they hired and fired Megyn Kelly after her blackface comments? There's a pattern to this. I vaguely remember this. This was before I started streaming. Megyn Kelly, former Fox News Channel personality, made a rocky transition to softer news at NBC, was fired from her morning show Friday after triggering a furor by suggesting it was okay for white people to wear blackface at Halloween. Ah, man, I couldn't make it at NBC either. They canned me for my position that it's okay as long as it's very funny, you know? It's my comedy first position. It really is crazy how far the bar has moved, you know? Because defending blackface, in terms of like political harm, is several orders of magnitude less damaging than whatever the this bitch is, you know? Fascist, election denier, like supported an insurrection against the state. Like, in terms of the magnitude of their, you know, crimes of potential harm, that now it's like, oh, well, actually, like, this is fine, you know? And she did this before being brought on NBC, as opposed to Megyn Kelly's comments, which were after. The decision to hire McDaniel sparked anger due to her backing of former President Donald Trump. No, New York Post, that is not all that she did.
They are fast and furious liars, and I doubt that I could keep up.
In this instance, NBC News, either wittingly or unwittingly, is teaching election deniers that what they can do stretches well beyond appearing on our air in interviews to peddle lies about the sanctity and integrity of our elections. What we've also said to election deniers is not just they can do that on our airwaves, but that they can do that as one of us.
Yeah, man, you know, you can spend your entire career propping up an organization dedicated to the collapse of the United States and the destruction of our democracy and the eradication of our civil rights. But after you're done doing that, because you've been ousted by somebody with 1% more Hitler particles than you can enjoy a comfy $350,000 a year salary as a contributor to an ostensibly liberal news show, you know? Yeah, don't think this gets in the way of any future career prospects. Don't forget she is allegedly on tape helping coup on January 6th. She's done a lot of stuff. The November 17, 2020 telephone call included then-President Trump Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel and Wayne County election authorities Monica Palmer and William Hartman, both Republicans, the Detroit News reported. Trump told the two canvassers they would look terrible if they certify results after having initially opposed certification, the newspaper said. The two ultimately issued signed affidavits asserting their opposition to certifying Wayne County results. She was a participant in the process of trying to overturn the election. National GOP Chairwoman McDaniel, a Michigan native, reportedly said during the call, quote, "If you can go home tonight, do not sign it," adding, "We will get you attorneys." They're saying don't certify the election results under Joe Biden. They're literally calling election certifiers saying, hey, sure would look bad if you certified Joe Biden's victory here. Sure would look bad. You shouldn't certify it. We'll get you attorneys if you get in trouble. How is she not in jail? Encouraging a person to commit a crime, and then saying you'll get them legal help if they get caught or get arrested for it. This is unambiguous. They did certify it the next day. Yes, they did.
as badge-carrying employees of NBC News, as paid contributors to our sacred airwaves.
We weren't asked our opinion of the hiring, but if we were, we would have strongly objected to it for several reasons, including, but not limited to, as lawyers might say, Ms. McDaniel's role in Donald Trump's fake elector scheme.
To be clear, we believe NBC News should seek out conservative Republican voices to provide balance in their election coverage.
No, that's the poison that makes you do this. No, balance is not, we need everyone's position on this, no matter how right or wrong they are. Like, what's that quote? Your job as a journalist, if you have one person saying that there is rain outside and one person saying there isn't, is not to get both of them on to debate it. Your job is to look outside and see if there's rain. You never need a conservative opinion, ever, because they're always wrong. You're often wrong. You're certainly wrong here. We don't need you either. Get out. Go. Leave.
But it should be conservative Republicans, not a person who used her position of power to be an anti-democracy election denier. And we hope NBC will reconsider its decision.
Ronna is Mitt Romney's niece. She is also, as of last week, a very, very well-paid contributor to NBC News, something that has alarmed many of us in this company. Because Ronna McDaniel has been a major peddler of the big lie. And she apparently still thinks there is a justification for committing state and federal felonies by submitting fake elector slates to Congress instead of the real ones, so that the loser of a presidential election can stay in power anyway. I wish I was fibbing, but I'm not.
You may have seen some news over the last few days about the hiring of former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel as an NBC News contributor.
This is, I gotta say, for what it's worth, I have never seen this much unified condemnation of a hiring decision from a news firm ever. All these contributors from NBC and MSNBC, like, just all of them going on and going like, yeah, no, we hate this, actually. I mean, that is something, I guess.
Contributor. And some, mainly in the right-wing ecosystem, have made the comparison to others who have come from government or politics into the media, including me. This isn't about Republicans versus Democrats. This isn't about red versus blue. This is about truth versus lies. Service to the country versus service to one man.
That is red versus blue. Dude, seriously, go through her Wikipedia page. The entire thing is dedicated to her being an awful person. She refused to condemn QAnon.
And I will also say, reconsider its decision.
By submitting family in the right-wing ecosystem have made the comparison to others who have come from government or politics into the media, including me. This isn't about Republicans versus Democrats. This isn't about red versus blue.
This is all super fun. This is yesterday's stuff, though. Has the network addressed it today? Yeah, she got canned like 2 hours ago.
This is about truth versus lies. Service to the country versus service to one man committed to toppling our democratic system.
What NBC has done is they've invited into what should be a normal framework someone who doesn't believe that framework.
Wait, has she? I thought I saw that she has. Has she not been canned yet? She let go after less than a week? Wasn't that the first thing? Chad is lying. No, I saw an article on it, but I don't see it now. I closed the tab. Where was the link? Who was the person who provided the link? Yellow name. Yellow name, I remember. Yellow name. There we go, facetious. Thank you. I remembered the yellow. She was fired, yeah. Thank you. NBC News to drop ex-RNC chair Ronna McDaniel. There we go. Okay, running it back. Back to the beginning. Let's go. To drop, yes. Yes, it says to drop, but you don't usually get fired on the spot. I'd be very surprised if they said they were going to drop her and then didn't. Like, I can't imagine... You know, that I can't imagine what benefit there would be to this. God, I hate looking at her stupid face. Too much work done.
Should exist at all. Because essentially what NBC is doing is saying, well, could be that in 24,
QAnon phrenology.
Our entire system will break down. Could be we'll have an authoritarian.
Yeah, unironically, you see a lot of this with conservative women, especially women in the far right, because they know that they're appealing to an electorate of people who really hate women. And they know that their political usefulness is tied pretty heavily to their, like, Stepford wife, gotta look good for the boys shit. The Laura Loomer effect. Yeah, literally. Yeah, there's a reason so many far-right ladies end up all looking like the same bloated Botox monsters. Because they're all desperately... Because I think a lot of it isn't, like, calculating. A lot of it is also just genuine self-hatred. I mean, keep in mind, they're female fascists, right? We're not talking about, like, the best internal world here. Depressing? They deserve it and worse, so whatever.
Leader. Oh, but look, we've made this adjustment in advance because we brought into the middle of NBC somebody who has already taken part in the attempt to take our system down. So, yeah, I think this is pretty bad.
And what they saw in the hiring of Ronna McDaniel is a decision to bring on board someone who's a liar. She lied to the American people in advancement of undermining democracy. She lied to the American people to further the autocratic movement that is Trumpism. And I think those two elements are why the viewers have grown so concerned.
I have a fat face because of menopause. Having a fat face because of menopause or hormones does not look the same as a face that's been bloated and smoothed over by Botox. Totally different looks.
To bring on a voice that suggests that no, none of what you actually saw was true. There's this counter narrative over here, jam-packed with lies, but I'm going to ask you to give me respect for that opinion. That's why the viewers feel betrayed.
Well, I'm glad there was so much condemnation. You know, that's good at least. Breaking Point's talked about this.
MSNBC, a little bit of a meltdown over there over the recent hiring of former RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. NBC hosts and Chuck Todd in particular openly lambasting their own bosses for hiring her. Let's take a listen.
I'll be joined by former RNC chair Ronna McDaniel in her first interview since stepping down as party chair. In full disclosure to our viewers, this interview was scheduled weeks before it was announced that McDaniel would become a paid NBC News contributor. This will be a news interview, and I was not involved in her hiring.
Let me deal with the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think our bosses owe you an apology for putting you in this situation.
We saw all this
because I don't
pretty
know what to
much.
believe. She is now a paid contributor. Republican convention. I think that would be certainly this interview, and then all of a sudden the rugs pull out from show up.
Now, it's
unfortunate for this program.
It's unfortunate, Crystal. Now, it's interesting. Now, there's a couple of things, because on one level, ethically, I don't disagree with him at all.
Okay.
That said, why are we not showing the same level of consternation about the number of other campaign officials that work at MSNBC? We have a list that we can show everybody in a little bit, but I want to hear what you have to say before we get into that.
I mean, I think this...
Well, let's engage with it, you know? Okay, sure. Let's be consistent, right? However, I doubt, like, you have to meet a pretty high bar to meet former RNC chairwoman who openly participated in an insurrectionary attempt, right? Like, to be clear, I'm sure NBC and MSNBC have hired plenty of people that I think are reprehensible. I know they have, but like, in terms of meeting the bar for this standard of condemnation, like, this is pretty high up there. That's pretty high up there.
A practice which is entirely commonplace and frankly has been for a while, of taking paid operatives from the political parties and putting them into quote unquote journalistic positions is a scourge.
Yes, I agree.
I think it's a scourge when it happens at Fox News. I think it's a scourge when it happens at NBC. And, you know, I don't think they're wrong to be upset about the hiring of Ronna McDaniel. And she, you know, from them, for an ideological perspective, she went along with she was in charge when all the Stop the Steal nonsense was unfolding. She went along with it. Now,
yeah, she actively participated as well. She wasn't just like a passive voice in it. She was there, you know?
Granted, the Trump people were mad that she didn't do more and didn't like blatantly just rig the Trump Republican primary in his favor and actually tried to run like a neutral primary. But from their perspective, they're like, we talk all day long about this threat to democracy, and then you hire this person that was central to, you know, what was going on during that time period. But you're right that obviously it's very selective. They don't have an across the board concern about hiring Jen Psaki, about hiring Simone Sanders, about the fact that, you know, reportedly.
Did they again, did they do anything that rises to that standard, you know? Like, it's not just every former political official. It's specifically what the RNC chairwoman did. My brain refuses to internalize brain. You know?
Joe and Mika are on the phone with Biden all the time. And, you know, there's a direct connect there. And so I think if you're going to be concerned about party-tied propagandists being put in these...
Her name. My brain refuses to internalize her name.
roles that now they're supposed to be credible and we're supposed to believe what they have to say and we're supposed to think that they don't have an agenda. I don't think you should be selective about it. Now, like I said, I understand why they have an issue here.
Jen Psaki's Israel coverage might be as bad. Well, sure. But that's an issue with the broader liberal position, not with the odiousness of Jen Psaki in particular, right? Like, again, with Ronna, we're talking about, Ronald McDonald, right? With Ronald McDonald, former RNC chairwoman, we're talking about like her specifically being a monster, the stuff that she's done, not just like liberal establishment stuff in general. Because if that's the case, like MSNBC wouldn't even exist, which, not to say that wouldn't be nice, but I want it replaced with something better, not just, removed.
Just think that they have some ideological blinders on or unable to apply the principle across the board.
And the ridiculous part of that is Simone Sanders, whose previous job at that before that network job, who was on the panel discussing Ronna McDaniel, was working for Kamala Harris in the administration. Guys, can we put C3, please, up there on the screen? This is what...
Okay, wait. So are they just going to say the reason it was bad for them to hire Ronald McDonald was because she's a former political official? Here's a bunch of other former political officials. That's not really the issue that it's not every former political official is equal in terms of how bad they are. Like, that's not really the argument.
Drives me crazy about all these people. Of the recent hires that these people have, Jen Psaki straight from the Biden podium over to MSNBC for her own television show. Simone Sanders is the exact same thing. I believe she has a show on Peacock. Would love to know the ratings on that one. Nicole Wallace, former Bush press secretary, comms director, direct pipeline to television, and now the host of the 4 to 6 p.m. hour or whatever. Joe Scarborough, arguably the king of the network himself, who talks directly to Biden on the phone. Former job, U.S. congressman. And then Michael Steele, former RNC chair. So let's be consistent, people.
This is really dumb. Man, I thought I'd get something good here. This is really dumb. They weren't all saying, hey, we want Ronald McDonald removed from the network because we believe all former political officials should be not allowed to. This is a very weak attempt at pushing hypocrisy. What's that? In lieu of an argument, an attack at imagined hypocrisy?
And yeah, I think it's gross too. Every time you turn on Fox News, Dana Perino, what's her only previous job? Comms director or press secretary to George W. Bush. Ari Fleischer, comms director to George W. Bush. Kayleigh McEnany, former press secretary to Donald Trump. Yeah, the pipeline is gross. These people whose only previous qualifications was lying to the American people on behalf of the government, then seemingly getting hired by Fox. But we have to be consistent, with our standard here. And for them, I think it's very obvious that they fall into a vision of like, oh, well, one is lying and the other one, is directionally, occasionally lied, but tried to steer the country.
Yeah, this is boring. This is just like failed attempt at whataboutism. Stupid. Ronna McDonald is exploring legal options if NBC drops her sources. I'm sure. Of course she would say that, yeah. We'll see how far that goes. This guy is always bad. He's decently smart. Like, he's a fascist, which is bad, but he usually makes better points than this, I feel. This is why capitalism is incompatible with democracy. True. Salger can't engage with the Jan 6 stuff. Well, because he doesn't want democracy. Salger is trash. I'm not saying he's not trash. He's a fascist. Is he a fascist or is he conservative? He's a fascist. 100%, yeah. He defers to those arguments constantly. The main faltering point for him, I remember his debate with Crystal Ball on immigration and the Great Replacement, and he tried so hard to make a non-racial version of he loves doing that. This is a very common thing that they have to do. They have to construct for optics reasons, a non-racialized argument for the Great Replacement theory. And they have to build it back up without, pretending it's not a race thing, which it doesn't work, but their attempt to do so is very telling. That was a big video.
Let's move on to how the public feels about this war, which is quite dissonant, especially the Democratic base, from how the elected officials have been supporting this war. Put this up on the screen. So we've got a whole bunch of polling from Pew Research Center. You've got Dems and Lean Dems basically split on yes, no, or don't know on whether Hamas's reasons for fighting Israel are valid, regardless of how acceptable respondent views October 7th. So there's a difference here, right? You have overwhelming sentiment against thinking that October 7th was acceptable, right? There's very few in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party.
Around 1 in 5 Americans say Hamas has valid reasons for fighting Israel. I think Hamas has valid reasons for fighting Israel. For young people, it's 34%. Among Muslims, it's about 50%.
Anywhere that say, hey, October 7th was acceptable. The question is, do you think that the reason that Hamas is fighting is valid? And you've got, in the Democrats and lean Democrats, you've got 38 saying invalid, 34 valid, and 28 not sure. And you can see here there's a significant partisan divide. You can also see, there's significant generational divide, which is, kind of a consistent theme across a lot of this polling. Let's go ahead and put this next piece up on the screen because I think this is really critical. So you have this question. Is the way that Israel is fighting this war with Hamas acceptable? And in the Democratic Party, with Democrats and lean Democrats, a majority, 52%, say it is unacceptable. Only 22% say that it is acceptable. And another 26% say that it's not, that they're not.
This is the state the Biden administration has hitched its credibility to. That was so smart of them. When even the Democrats are 52 to 22 percentage points on finding it unacceptable. The most moral army in the world.
Not sure. So, Sagar, this one really demonstrates how at odds the Biden administration is with their own base of voters and how differently those voters are viewing what is happening here.
Yeah, can we go to the next one, please, and put it up there on the screen? Because a lot of the breakdowns are actually very important. It says Americans are divided over whether Biden is striking the right balance. And, quote, percent who say Joe Biden is favoring Israelis too much. Amongst Democrats, that's a full 34%. Striking the right balance is 29%. Not sure if
the problem is framing October 7th as fighting Israel is not what that was. It was killing civilians. That's fighting it. No, you can disagree with the way in which Hamas failed to adhere to like the standards of war, which I do, while also acknowledging October 7th was a part of fighting against Israel. Like much in the same way, like you could say fairly, and you'd be correct too, that Al Qaeda doing 9/11 was a fight against America. That's not really an endorsement of the mechanisms of their fight, but it certainly was that. It was still a fight,
33% and favoring Palestinians too much. You have 3%. So I think really what you are seeing here is a major and consolidated shift. The next one also seems very, very important to me, which is about the U.S. military aid, because again, you have in there the number on lean Democrats, and you see that the majority are not really in favor of sending aid to Israel and or not sure. But you also see, I think, some major changes kind of in the overall view of the U.S. electorate on Israel. And I think that's actually what's most important. It's not just about Democrats. We're talking here about military aid to what was previously one of the most popular countries, in the entire United States. And when we look at some of that loss and some of that breakdown, I think that has been a societal-wide shift for which Israel is really going, I think, to pay the consequences. A lot of that started with Bibi's speech, before Congress, with Obama back in 2015. But this has really made it so that I think Israel has now basically allied itself with an explicit political party in the U.S. And we're about to get to that too with Trump, where Trump can be all over the map on policy. He's probably going to be very, very pro-Israel. That said,
even the Republicans aren't that pro-Israel. It's like the tendency isn't that partisan, I feel.
That's a very, very bad strategic way to align yourself, because previously they really did have a lot more bipartisan consensus than I think where we're headed right now. I think 10, 15 years from now, the current status quo is unimaginable.
Yeah.
With the current amount of Democrats.
Well, Trump makes some interesting comments about that. Put a pin in that, because you're
Yeah.
going to, they're just the most Trumpian comments on this subject you could possibly imagine. There was also a real commentary, if you dig into this data, on the media coverage, because first of all, only about half of U.S. adults could even correctly answer the question of whether Israelis or Palestinians had suffered more deaths. Think about that. Only half of the U.S. public thought that they could answer that question correctly. They did not know that the toll on the Palestinian side has been multiples of times greater.
I did see that. Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. A very, very deliberate product of American media obfuscating the coverage. The idea that anyone could have a strong opinion on the conflict but not know that more Palestinians have died than Israelis is like a sort of like widespread act of journalistic malpractice. If you read news articles online, a lot of them will now have the little sort of necessary blurb of this many people have died on both sides. But I've seen a lot of just general news coverage, and it doesn't often get covered. Those get copy and pasted into the articles with updated death tolls every time the new numbers come in. But in terms of just like what you see broadly in media, especially in television, not so much.
And then they also tracked. So the people who said they weren't sure and didn't know which side had suffered more casualties and more deaths, they had a very different opinion of this conflict. They were much more, in general, sort of pro-Israel and, likely susceptible to accept the Israeli propaganda, the Biden administration propaganda with regards to what's happening here. So I'll give you some of those numbers. They say those that were aware that more Palestinians have died are about twice as likely to say Biden is favoring Israelis too much as to say he's favoring the Palestinians too much. Among those who do not know that more Palestinians have died, you have 15% saying Biden is favoring the Palestinians too much, and only 9%.
Is there any single piece of footage reporting IDF stands can point to defend their we're trying to minimize civilian casualties? Yeah, a few months ago, there was that hysterical post from the IDF on Twitter where they were trying to show off how moral they were because they had like drone cameras overlooking a building. And they were like, wait, there are kids in here. Don't blow up the building. And they posted that like proudly, like, look at how moral we are. After hearing that there were children in the building, we didn't blow it up from the sky, you know? It was like, I'm telling you, it would be the equivalent of like a bunch of people accusing me of being a murderous psychopath. So I take a video of me grabbing a kitchen knife, walking outside and walking past a homeless person on a highway underpass, my hand quivering as I hold the knife, but I walk past the homeless person to the other side of the underpass, and then I put the camera to my face and go, see? I didn't even stab him, yo! And then I post that and I'm like, debunking the haters, you know? Like actually the level of psychosis.
Say that he's favoring the Israelis too much. By 69 to 16,
and then you stab him right after that.
Those who know that more Palestinians have died favor the U.S. providing humanitarian aid, but those who don't know the balance of casualties, only 29% favor providing aid and 23% oppose it. So, I mean, there's a few things to say here. First of all, you can see why they're so upset about TikTok and why this has, really reignited this whole conversation about, and a lot of political momentum around banning TikTok, because it breaks up some of the consistent propaganda that you get across mainstream media outlets to the, that is so fulsome that most Americans don't even know the very basic numbers around which side has suffered more casualties, and that dramatically impacts the way that they're viewing this conflict. I thought that was really
This is true. As much as I think people who are educated by TikTok are somehow even more brain damaged than people who get their education exclusively from YouTube, it is definitely true that TikTok has a pretty strong, like, young anti-Israel slant to it, which is good. I mean, I don't know. If getting young people on board with being anti-genocide comes along with them believing that the Egyptian pyramids are actually two strands of hair on the head of the stone golem that lives in the core of the earth, like I don't know. You get the bad with the good, okay? At least they're not pro-genocide.
Noteworthy.
I thought it was noteworthy, but I'm going to say, I don't know if it's just TikTok. I don't spend any time. I don't even have TikTok, but I'm on the internet. I'm on Twitter. I think that's
it's
actually
not just
enough.
TikTok.
That's what I mean. I think it's just being on the internet.
They think TikTok is sort of like uniquely,
I don't disagree. That said, I mean, I go on my Instagram Reels, and even there I get served up, some Palestinian content or whatever. I follow a couple of guys, people who are like military analysts and others who are relatively dispassionate. More so, I would just say, if you are not consuming mainstream media, which is the vast majority of people under the age of 55, you are, I mean, this is a key theme of our show, right? You are living literally in an entirely different world than if you're just getting everything served up on CNN or MSNBC. I also think some of it comes down to moral weight. I mean, this is something we balance here on our show in terms of programming and all of that. But if you do spend any time, Crystal, looking at the vast majority of coverage that these people spend their time on, like Trump trial and the minutia of Stormy Daniels, or MSNBC yesterday, every single hour of their show issued a segment, including Rachel Maddow, dedicated to speaking out against Ronna McDaniel. Like, that's what they think is important. And it almost gaslights like boomers and other people in this country into thinking you're like, yeah, you know what? These are...
I think the political rehabilitation of a fascist who tried to do an insurrection against the government is probably a worthwhile thing to cover, to an extent, especially if they were brought on to the network you're on with Rachel Maddow. Also, the minutia of the court cases on Donald Trump, a presidential candidate with multiple felonies, like, I don't know, that seems kind of valid and relevant, I feel, in my opinion.
The trend-setting issues of our day.
That's right.
I mean, here's, again, look, I get it. It is a balance.
When are they going to speak out against Nicole Wallace?
Right, exactly. The reason, for today, we can lead our show here with Israel, which I don't see a lot of people in cable or other doing, is because we're like, wow, this is a breakdown in the U.S.-Israeli relationship. At the same time, it exposes a lot of stuff. It was major headline news, all across Washington. And I just don't see a lot of seriousness in the way that they have coverage. So there's a fulsome conversation where I still come down on the people of the young actually know what's up.
Yes,
because they have better prioritization of what's really important and what's not than the people who are the so-called programmers.
Absolutely the case.
It is kind of terrifying that on average younger people have better opinions on a lot of this stuff than older people, and I know what younger people are like, and so yeah, it is genuinely quite terrifying. I mean, American boomers have been like subhumanly stupid on a political level for a long time, I feel.
And it's not an accident that they fall back to their, like, you know, and I'm not saying these things are like not important, what's going on with Trump. We're going to cover it too, right? But they fall back to that because that's very easy and very safe for them.
Exactly.
No one's losing their job over at MSNBC by saying Trump is bad, or Trump is a criminal or whatever. But you could ask Mehdi Hassan how it went for him at MSNBC when he was not only critical of Israel, but also was willing to really aggressively challenge Israeli spokespeople who would come on his show. Guess what? He doesn't have a job there anymore. Now, you can read into that what you will, but he's not the first either. Ask Mark Lamont Hill how that went for him over at CNN.
True.
So these people are not stupid. They're careerists. They want to keep their job. They want to keep their platform. They can justify that in their minds however they want. You know, well, at least I can be here and say a little bit of something about something true and something real and something important. And if I'm gone, then, you know, the next person may not even do that. But they understand what line they need to walk and where the safe space is for them in terms of their career. And so all of the incentives are in the opposite of direction of actually covering this conflict in a way just that is factual and honest as what is actually happening on the ground. And so as a result of that, you end up with a population where a majority do not even know the basic fact that Palestinians have suffered multiples more losses during this conflict than Israelis. And you end up with the views that, you know, boomers have in this conflict. And you can see consistently the generational conflict. The one other thing, Sagar, that I thought was really interesting, noteworthy, is they asked about how people felt, and these are all Americans, right, about the Israeli government, approve, disapprove. The religious group that had the highest approval rating for the Netanyahu government, you're going to guess?
Evangelicals.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. Clear as day. All right, well, not much to disagree with there.